Alright, capitalism, for a lot of us, especially younger generations like myself, feels like a farce. And it's not just that it's failing, it's that it's starting to constrict. Like it's pressing in on us, leaving us less room to live, breathe, or even dream. I just finished reading After Capitalism by David Schweickart, and honestly, this book laid out ideas that really inspired me. Not because they're utopian or out of touch, but they actually offer something real, something we could actually do. Because let's be honest, capitalism is on life support. We're overworked, underpaid, and the planet's on fire. And somehow the billionaires are still winning. And every time someone asks, okay, but what's the alternative? Nobody has a clear answer. That's by design. That's how capitalism protects itself with the myth of Tina. There is no alternative. That's where this video comes in. I want to walk you through what a serious alternative to capitalism could actually look like. This isn't Soviet nostalgia. This isn't about slogans. It's about systems. This is about economic democracy, a system that actually centers people's autonomy and self-agency, not just profits. So here's the issue. We've spent decades calling out capitalism, and yeah, we're right to do that. But most of the left hasn't given people a real plan for what comes next. That's why people cling to capitalism. It's not because they love it, it's because they don't see any other way out. David Schweickart calls this the problem of the successor system. If you don't offer a vision of what replaces capitalism, then capitalism just keeps defaulting to power. And here, he's building on the work of Marx. Marx believed that as society evolves, systems collapse under their own contradictions, and something new emerges. But Schweickart says we can't just sit around waiting for collapse and hope for the best. That's how we end up with authoritarianism. The fall of the Soviet Union wasn't the death of socialism. It was a sign that that version couldn't adapt. But it left behind lessons, real data, things that worked, and things that didn't. So Schweikart's whole point is, let's take those lessons and build something new, something adaptive, something democratic, something grounded in what people actually need. You might be thinking, okay, this all sounds good, but has it ever really worked? Let me introduce you to Mondragon, a massive federation of worker-owned cooperatives in the Basque region of Spain. Tens and thousands of workers, their own bank, their own schools, research and development centers, and it all started with one man, Father Jose Maria Arizmendiarrieta. He wasn't an economist, he wasn't a CEO, he was a Catholic priest and a radical thinker. After the Spanish Civil War, the Basque region was crushed. Poverty was everywhere, the economy was in ruins. But Arizmendiarrieta believed something different, that working people could rebuild their community, not through charity, but through cooperation and democratic control. He started by founding a small technical school in the 1940s, believing that education was one of the most important tools to lift people out of poverty. So he began teaching working class youth and then helped them start a co-op, and then another and another. He didn't do this for profit. He did it because he believed in human dignity and that democracy is a human right and that should extend into the workplace. That no one should be ruled by capital just because they are born without it. This vision, simple, radical, and deeply moral, is what built Mondragon, and it lasted for decades. Mondragon didn't just survive, it thrived, even during economic crashes. They train their own entrepreneurs, they reinvest profits in the community, they cap executive pay. And even though they're operating within the global capitalist economy, they've shown that democratic workplaces can function and compete. Now, is it perfect? No. Some workers, especially in manual labor, have expressed feeling disconnected from ownership. But again, they're operating inside a capitalist system. That tension isn't just about Mondragon, it's about the environment they're in. But here's what it proves. You don't need billionaires. You don't need elite capitalists managing everything from the top. What you need is a vision and people who have a stake in what they're building. That's what Arizmendiarrieta understood. He didn't talk about revolution in abstract terms, he built one, quietly, locally, with education, dignity, and solidarity at the center. Okay, Now, imagine your life in this system. You wake up, and instead of dragging yourself to a job where you're just a cog, you go to work with people, not for someone. You work fewer hours, you vote on decisions, you share the profits. Your community gets funding because it exists, not because it's profitable. There's still income differences. Like Schweickart talks about a 10-to-1 income range, but no one's starving and no one's hoarding billions. That's not equality for the sake of it, that's stability, dignity, and sanity. You're not just surviving, you're building a life that makes sense. Alright, so here's the part that really matters. How do we actually get from capitalism to economic democracy? Schweickart isn't talking about insurrectionist revolutions or storming Wall Street with pitchforks. He lays out real steps, reforms that can start now, but that also opens the door to much deeper structural change. And I think this part matters most because this is what makes economic democracy feel viable. Step 1, workplace reform. Start by expanding co-ops, not just small-scale Etsy-style co-ops, but producer cooperatives that grow in scale. Schweickart suggests laws that make it easier for workers to buy out failing capitalist firms. If a business is going under, workers should have the right of first refusal to turn it into a cooperative. Other policies that can be pushed for are profit-sharing mandates, worker representation on boards, and most importantly, democratic control in firms above a certain size. That last one is key. Once a company hits, say, 100 plus workers, the state could mandate that workers elect management and have direct control over major decisions. Which isn't some out of the ordinary idea. This kind of worker empowerment has been seriously discussed in policy circles, and even in some conservative ones. Step 2, investment reform. Now here's where it gets more economically intense, but also more powerful. Schweickart calls for the creation of democratized investment mechanisms, public banks, democratized pension funds, and eventually a capital assets tax on all productive enterprises. Here's how it works. Every business pays a tax on its capital, machinery, buildings, tech, and that money gets pulled nationally, then redistributed to regions and communities on a per capita basis. It's like a public venture capital fund, except instead of investing for profit, it invests to create jobs, community wealth, and long-term stability. Local banks, accountable to democratic bodies, decide where those funds go. They prioritize projects that create employment, firms with democratic structures, and environmentally sustainable industries. Step 3, the rich kind of still exist. Now, this part is important. A lot of people think if we abolish capitalism, do rich people just lose everything overnight? And the answer is no. Schweickart proposes a nonviolent, non-expropriative transition. Stockholders, instead of losing everything, would receive annuities for a fixed period, like 20 or 30 years. Basically, you're not getting your dividends anymore, but will phase you out with long-term payments based on your prior holdings. So the wealthy still live well, they're just not controlling the economy anymore. Their wealth isn't being used to exploit labor or destabilize democracies. It's being redistributed in a way that supports workers and communities. This part makes the shift more politically viable because it answers the fear of total upheaval. It gives people a way out without collapse. And it also expresses a truth. The issue isn't luxury, it's power. Who controls the economy? Who controls investment? Who makes the rules? Under economic democracy, that control shifts quietly, steadily, and democratically. Step 4, nationalize the banks. One of the fastest ways to make this transition real? Nationalize the banking system. Even conservative economists, especially after 2008, have floated the idea of a public banking infrastructure. And it makes sense. Why should the people who crash the economy still be in charge of rebuilding it? A national network of public banks could collect capital asset taxes, provide business loans to democratic firms, and end the cycle of speculative finance and capital flight. And because these banks would be publicly owned, there's no profit motive to steer them toward risky behavior. The 4 big reforms that flip the switch. Schweickart says once these 4 things happen, we've crossed over. End all private interest and dividend payments, give democratic control to all firms above a certain size, use a capital assets tax to fund national investment, and nationalize banks and democratize investment allocation. And what's wild is, none of these stop people from working, consuming, or building things. They just remove the investor class as the middleman. Life goes on, but power has changed hands. Capitalism isn't the final stage of history, it's just the one we're stuck in right now. But we've got options, and economic democracy is one that is viable, grounded, and one of the more doable models I've come across. Not to say that it is a perfect system or something that will definitively work, but this isn't some utopia. It's a system that gives people a voice, gives communities investment, and gives the planet a chance to breathe. If this resonated with you, feel free to subscribe. I'll be breaking down more ideas like this, connecting public health, justice, and socialism in real ways that matter. Now, before I go, I want to acknowledge something. Schweickart also talks about how capitalism reinforces systems of oppression, like sexism, racism, immigration control, and poverty, and how we're stuck living in what he calls a polyarchy, not a true democracy. This is heavy and deserves focus. Those are massive topics, and they deserve their own space. So in future videos, I'll be digging into that more deeply with help from other thinkers like Murray Bookchin and Carl Polanyi. But I didn't want to force those conversations into this one because they need room to breathe. And trust me, they're coming. If you want early access to future essays or to support the work I'm doing here, join the Patreon. Every bit helps build this platform into something bigger. This is Dialectical Dispatch. Thanks for being here.